I wanted to talk about confinement. And then I decided I also wanted to talk about liberty. And then I was thinking about that some more because I have thought a lot about confinement. And then I realized this morning that my name, Tarpa, is moksha. And moksha means liberation. But there's a lot of words that mean liberation. And this is liberation in the sense of you are bound up, like tied up with ropes, and you are freed. So confinement and liberation. But I'm not, moksha is more of a super mundane level. I'm talking about mundane things here. So I spent 21 and a half months confined due to my own choosing. And I found that sometimes kind of challenging. And I intentionally brought certain things to mind that turned my mind very quickly. I thought about my mom, who I could go out for a walk anytime I wanted. I could go out and do things. I just didn't have, it was hard to be a nun and do that. But anyway, I was doing this all by choice. And then I thought a lot about Brittany Griner and Paul Whelan and others who were wrongly detained. And then I read a book that, I guess it was in October, November, called Solitary, Unbroken by 4 Decades in Solitary Confinement, My Story of Transformation and Hope, by a man named Albert Woodfox, who actually was confined in solitary for 40 years in Louisiana, which still has very strange laws. They just had this week in the newspaper that whereas when somebody is to be freed from prison, it usually takes a few hours to a few days. It takes an average of 40 days in Louisiana. So people are confined there. But this man educated himself. And it was a very interesting book to read, especially someone of my age, because I grew up hearing about the Black Panther Party. And I love to read books by people whose lives are totally interesting, but they're a kind of life I would never know. I wouldn't understand their experience. And he was unbroken. You know, his title, Unbroken. He was unbroken. And there were a lot of things I learned from reading about how he kept his sanity. And one thing was that he never lost his sense of dignity as a human being. And he taught himself a lot about, he taught himself to have, I really think, a kind of integrity and consideration for others that saw him through, which are mental factors that we cultivate in our practice. And the sense of human dignity is sometimes explained as a sense of self-respect and self-worth, physical and psychological integrity and empowerment. Well, he didn't have the physical side of that at all, not at all, but he kept his psychological side together. And this whole thing with the prison, the world of prisons and what's happening in them is difficult for me, for my mind. Angela Merkel said once, when it comes to human dignity, we cannot make compromises. But, you know, both of the people I mentioned, Albert Woodfox and also Brittany Griner, found that they read Dostoevsky because he had the experience of being in prison in Russia back when things were even harder in those penal codes, penal societies, or whatever they call them, penal colonies. Dostoevsky said the degree of civilization in a society can be judged by entering its prisons. And I think that's really something to think about. A more recent human being, a Harvard Law professor, Nancy Gertner, who's a retired federal judge, echoed the same sentiments, that the quality of a society is measured by how we deal with the least fortunate. And the people in our prisons are the least fortunate. It's a measure of our humanity. So this topic, you know, when I see what's happening, sometimes I kind of feel like, wow, we have so much fallen short as a society and as a nation. And then I have to find a way to turn this around. And so somehow, I can't remember how I heard about this, but something I read said, you should read this small speech that Ruth Bader Ginsburg made, it was 4 years ago tomorrow. And it was a naturalization where, what do they call that meeting? I don't know the word. Ceremony, there's the word. It was a ceremony. And I just want to read part of what she said, because I think that as monastics, we're supposed to follow the law of the land. And in our own Vinaya, we really have two sides to it, the things that are prohibited, but also the things that we do. So I feel like we should know a little bit about the law. And I wasn't very well educated in this, but I love what she said. She said, "You have studied our system of government and know its twin pillars. First, our government has limited power. It can exercise only the authority given to it by the Constitution. And second, citizens of this country enjoy certain fundamental rights. So those rights are our nation's hallmark. They're set forth in the Bill of Rights and other provisions of the amendments to the Constitution. They are inalienable. Yielding to no government decree, our Constitution opens, just as you have heard, with the words, 'We, the people of the United States.' By limiting government, specifying rights, and empowering people, the founders of the United States proclaimed the heart of America would be its citizens, not its rulers." And then she went on to quote, and this is what really drew me into the part about liberation and liberty. There was an early French observer of the United States, and he's Alex de Tocqueville, close. And he wrote that the greatness of America lies not in being more enlightened than other nations, but rather in her ability to repair her faults. And this is the kind of attitude that I think I need to have when I watch our society and our nation, and to have a more realistic attitude, and to see that kind of like we do with our purification. We have faults, but we have a way to work with them. And our system of government is supposed to do this as well. And so that's one thing she quoted. But then she went on to say that, this society the work of perfection is scarcely done. We have many stains. She says, "In this rich land, nearly a quarter of our children live in poverty. Nearly half of our citizens do not vote, and we still struggle to achieve greater understanding and appreciation of each other across racial, religious, and socioeconomic lines." So we haven't gotten there. And this thing about achieving a greater understanding and appreciation of each other is the point that I think is quite important here. And that how is it that we can reach people to want to have a greater understanding of others? Because I'm actually somewhat struck with, in the division that we have in our country, that there isn't more common ground where people want to share sometimes. I've noticed among people that I know quite well that they're kind of different from the people sitting in this room in the sense of, in some ways, they don't seem to want to understand others as much. And how do we reach people? And I think it's somewhat through stories. I don't think that, we need laws and we need all these kind of things, but I think that there's a kind of education that we need. And I think stories is one way that really gets into people's heart, or when they know people. So she went on to convey this one last thing that she wanted to talk about. There's an American jurist, Judge Learned Hand, who understood liberty, and he explained it in 1944, what liberty meant to him. And he did this again at one of these ceremonies of new Americans when they were swearing allegiance to the United States as part of the ceremony. And he said, "Just what is the sacred liberty that must lie in the hearts of men and women? It is not the ruthless, unbridled will. It is not the freedom to do as one likes." So those are not liberty, and we can see that. That doesn't bring freedom to anyone. "I cannot define the spirit of liberty," he went on to say, "but I can tell you my own faith." And he's going to explain what the spirit of liberty is to him. The spirit of liberty is the spirit which is not too sure that it is right. So that speaks to like a lack of pride, a way of entering in a situation. The spirit of liberty is the spirit which seeks to understand the minds of other men and women. The spirit of liberty is the spirit which weighs their interests alongside its own without bias. And this is what the Ruth Bader Ginsburg were telling these new citizens, that to let this spirit of liberty be your beacon, and encouraging them to have the conscience and the courage to act in accordance with these high ideals. And this is really what happened with Albert Woodfox. He developed these ideals that he learned through the Black Panther Party, which did a lot of social welfare kind of work. And he, with no help hardly, because he was in prison the whole time, he made this his own, and he never lost that. And, I think that when we hear stories like this and we can understand and think about liberty in a different way, because there have been a lot of conversations that I hear of late about, I have the freedom to do this and the freedom to do that, and there's like debates, like, can I say anything I want, and are you going to get sued in the media? What's acceptable, what's not? We're kind of, I don't feel like we've had the right conversation sometimes. So I think hearing stories about remarkable people and learning ideas from remarkable people who have got a lot of background, I'm sure this judge had a lot of background that he based his words upon, to say it's, he's probably seen, it's not ruthless, unbridled will. It's not just the freedom to do as one likes. To take this kind of stance about what mundane liberation, what mundane liberty might be is really something that I think is something to strive for and something to kind of set as an ideal that we can work towards. It really speaks to me of a kind of informing your values, which is what integrity is to have values that you are trying to live up to. Not that we always can, but they're based on some kind of self-respect that's based on things that you value. So I think I like to think about this in this way to balance out, like, how do we get from where we are and where we want to be.